Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Innovation World Young Collaborators podcast. My name is Ruth Gelaye, and I'm a high school student from Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, Maryland. Go Wildcats. I'm an entrepreneur, and I currently run an organization called Novasta. And basically, what we're doing is working to alleviate food waste and food insecurity by redirecting food that's left over from restaurants at the end of the day to homeless shelters locally. And we have youth volunteers donate that food to the shelters. And what makes Novasta unique is our triple focus on food waste alleviation, food insecurity alleviation, and also policy and advocacy. So, as someone who's looking to go into the legal world, it's definitely inevitable to see the magnitude of policy, especially in the realm of environment. And with Novasta, my team and I have been finding ways that we can work towards getting involved in food law, environmental law, and advocate for some sort of long-term policy change that can combat the food waste and food insecurity crises. So today I'm thrilled to be joined by Taylor Quinn, who's an incredible innovator and changemaker working to end global hunger by designing food systems that are nutritious, affordable, and sustainable. So Taylor's work spans continents from Somalia to Brazil, and he collaborates with farmers, entrepreneurs, and global organizations to bring food solutions to communities that are in need of them most. He's the founder of Tailored Food and a recognized leader in the fight against malnutrition, and definitely an inspiration to myself and anyone else working to in the fight of sustainability, alleviation of food insecurity, and combating malnutrition. And a quick note, I just wanted to say that I met with an organization in Ethiopia called Bennu working to combat malnutrition earlier that I found on your website in ways that we can discuss that Novasa could potentially help their mission. So your impact is truly far-reaching beyond just the direct work that you're doing. So in this
Cool.
episode,
Thank you.
yes. So in this episode, we'll be diving into Taylor's journey, his vision for a hunger-free world, and what it really takes to turn ideas into lasting impact. Taylor, welcome to the show. Let's start with this. How did your journey start, and where did your passion derive from?
Well, firstly, thank you, Ruth, and to the entire team for having me on. And it's so wonderful to hear that you've connected with the Bennu team in Ethiopia. They're an incredible organization and one that I've really enjoyed supporting. Um, so for me, I've always been really passionate about social impact um, and and always worked in social impact, but my intellectual curiosities were largely around food and how people ate, why people eat what they eat. I studied food anthropology in university, so trying to understand, how is food different across different cultures? What does baby food mean, from one culture to the next? Um, and in short, I had worked in social impact, but then it wasn't until I was living in Liberia in West Africa back in 2015 when I was 23 years old, where I met with a doctor who completely changed the way that I saw the food landscape and the issue of malnutrition. And this doctor explained to me, he's like, look, you know, the kids who are dying of starvation, who he treated at his hospital, these kids were buying, their families were buying, food every day and spending real cash on food. It wasn't an issue of poverty so much as it was an issue of the food system just wasn't providing nutritious food at a price point and in forms that people were looking for. So it was like a complete market failure. And so I became really obsessed with the question of could we design and scale nutritious, low cost food products that taste really good, that are culturally relevant, and that people are excited to eat?
Thank you for sharing such an inspirational journey. And in that same vein, I kind of wanted to ask, how do you prioritize the four principles that you just mentioned of your food items being nutritious, delicious, affordable, and also local in cases where they might seem to conflict?
Yeah, so we find that, we're able to, the exciting thing for us about doing work at the kind of grassroots level is we find those four things often end up all being true at the same time. If we prioritize affordability, we will inherently try to build local value chains, you know, to reduce transport costs and to reduce packaging needs and all those types of factors that then help us reduce our pricing. We focus on food that's nutritious, but the cool thing is the flavor in foods is actually like the more flavorful foods are inherently more nutritious. When you talk about real flavors and not just flavoring things with chemicals or sugar or salt. So again, like if we have a product that has like a stronger coconut flavor, then the product is inherently more nutritious than a product that has just like a plain sugar flavor. So we find, we're able to strike the balance, and those four pillars usually all move in the same direction. Of course, sometimes we have to, make decisions that, hey, yeah, we could use this like really terrible cheap ingredient, or we can use this other more nutritious local ingredient. And then we have to find cost savings in other aspects of the value chain.
I think it's super interesting to hear about how food that's more nutritious ends up being more flavorful. So I kind of wanted to touch upon next, what's your tool for navigating cultural differences and local contexts when you do design these food products across the world?
Yes, for us, when we're thinking about how to operate in different cultural contexts, I think the biggest thing is really we try to go into every new context we're working in with as little assumption as possible on how the food system works, on how people work, on how business works. And so we try as much as possible to really operate and follow the lead of local partners and local leaders from the nuances of like, where do we sit in a community meeting? And like, do we sit on the chair? Do we sit on the ground? Who do we sit next to? That's all, really important. All the way down to, of course, yeah, actually designing and building food businesses. Um, and in some places, it makes sense to design really large scale facilities, for example. And in other places, it makes sense to do things in really decentralized ways. So there's plenty of nuance. I think also, just simply like in terms of how we flavor our foods, um, something that I might like eating, coming from my cultural background, might be totally different than what a child in Eastern Liberia likes eating. And so really ensuring we are not making any assumptions and just as at every step of the process, validating decisions we're making with the communities we're operating in to make sure that like we are taking as human-centered design as much of a human-centered design approach as possible.
Thank you. That sounds like a very thorough approach. And I kind of wanted to add on to that by hearing about what city or trail has left the greatest impression on you and why.
Um, yeah, I think for me, the place where in many ways, like I grew up and became an adult was Monrovia, Liberia, in West Africa. I moved to Monrovia when I was 22 years old. At the time, Ebola was going on in West Africa, in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea. Um, and Monrovia at the time was known as the worst city in the world. Um, so I moved to Monrovia, and it's really a place that I really fell in love with the place, with the people, with the community I built there. Um, and it's a city that is such a kind of representation of progress in that Monrovia was a very bustling, very developed city in the 1950s and 1960s. US movie stars would go there on vacation. And nowadays it's the opposite. It's really progressed in the opposite direction after years of civil conflict and then kind of international conflict and a lot of other challenges, including most recently Ebola. Um, but it's a city that's so beautiful and at the same time so broken in so many ways. So it's this place of contrast. And I think living in a city like that for a few years, as I built the first nutritious food business alongside our Liberian partner, Kawada Farm, as we built that business in a city like Monrovia that holds so much potential, but also, is full of so many challenges. Um, it sets you in reality of the complexity of the world, but also like gives you hope of what's possible. Um, and so getting to know Monrovia and getting to know Monrovia by running, I would spend hours running through lower income communities. Monrovia is also a fun city in that a lot of it is built on like marshland, like on a big river system. So running through beautiful, small, low income communities that, are sitting in kind of semi dry, semi wet marshland was always a really good way to just really to deeply get to know the place.
It's so wonderful that you're able to connect with the places that you're making an impact in. And I think that the passion that you hold when you speak about these locations is so far-reaching. So this makes me curious about how you measure progress in addressing global challenges, such as your goal of global zero hunger by 2030. So how do you measure success in your effort, and where do you currently stand?
So I would say we're doing a pretty good job in that we as Tailored Food, we align with the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 2 of ending hunger by 2030. And while that goal is very ambitious, while the world is continuing to move in the wrong direction, there's more and more hungry people every year right now. Food is a weird social problem in that it's completely private sector. Even the lowest income people, they're spending cash on food every day. They are active, empowered consumers who are making conscious decisions on what to buy every day. And so compared to other social challenges where it would require giant government investments in education or healthcare, food is not that way. The food system doesn't require much investment. It just requires building a better private sector and giving low income families everywhere better options when they're spending their hard earned income on food every day. So, anyways, all that being said, we are making progress in that we as an organization, we've now done over 7 million meals, 7 million nutritious low cost meals in countries like Congo, Liberia, Somalia, Haiti over the last couple of years since we've existed in 2020. Today, we work in 31 countries, and we've really expanded our partnership. We are setting the direction and working closely with partners like UNICEF in 28 countries, with the World Food Program, with the World Bank, big nonprofits like Save the Children and Mercy Corps, and then occasionally the private sector as well. I think we've realized that if we want to achieve our goals, we can be much more effective at achieving our goals if we can get the opportunity to go into the biggest organizations out there and change how they work. So we do a lot of work ourselves, but we're much more successful if we can inherently kind of go inside the big organizations and change how they work.
That's so great to hear. And certainly the impact that you've made is so invaluable. I think 7 million meals, but 7 million nutritious meals that you've been providing to the community is super duper impactful. And I kind of wanted to talk about how food system projects often might not go as planned. And as someone who's had my fair share of struggles in the world of innovation, I would love to hear about a time where a food system project kind of went array and astray and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, so inherently, we've running food system projects is hard anywhere, most definitely, especially complicated places like the United States, where the food system is like there's a lot of hidden interests and a lot of corruption involved in the US in the food system. Um, but for us, we work in a lot of complex economies that where doing business is inherently really complicated. So, for example, for 2 years in Liberia, I was failing over and over again. I was trying to work with the wrong businesses. I was trying to deal with the Lebanese mafia who controls the food system in Liberia, but I hadn't yet figured out how to properly deal with that community. I was trying to speak out against Liberian government corruption, but therefore none of my approvals that I needed, none of my permits were getting approved because of that. So yeah, so I was just facing a lot of failure after failure. But when you persist and you continue to learn and adapt and take lessons and then tweak the approach, eventually we found the right partner. I was able to get the permits I needed from the Liberian government without engaging in corruption, and I was able to get the Lebanese mafia to be friendly enough with me that they didn't shut down my business. Um, so eventually, like it all came together, but yeah, there was a lot of failure along the way to get to that point.
Yeah, I can completely agree that persistence is definitely the key to making an impact. And I'm so glad that you were able to work through those conflicts and economies where doing business definitely seems much more complicated than here. So, how do you think youth can contribute to
Mhm.
building sustainable food systems?
I think first and foremost, food is something we're all engaging with each and every day, whether at home, whether with our friends, whether in our schools. So ask the question, in your school cafeteria or to your parent, hey, do we know where this chicken breast came from? Or this can of soda? Um, do we care to know? Do we want to know? Like were communities that we care about negatively affected by the production of this piece of food? Were communities we care about positively affected by the production of this type of food? I feel like if you're, also at the same time, young people, including yourself, Ruth, are starting companies, starting organizations, doing impactful work at a larger scale too. But food is so fun because like at least 3 times a day, if you're in North America, or 2 times a day maybe, depending on your economic situation, you're making really conscious decisions of what you put in your body. And behind every bite is so many, decision points in a value chain, so much economic impact on communities, um, and impact on animals and the environment. So being conscious of that and starting to, I would say, start by asking questions. Where does your food come from? How does it get from where it's produced to your front door, to your kitchen table? And then decide what type of food you want on your kitchen table, and go seek that out.
Thank you. That's certainly some great food for thought, ironically. And so you touched on this before, but definitely the food system has a lot of corruption in the United States, and nutrition has been a point of discussion within Novasta, and I'm so curious to learn more. So thank you for that. And I think that that wraps up all our questions. Taylor, thank you so much for your time. Hearing about your journey has definitely been invaluable, and all the information that you've provided has been all the most inspirational. Thank you for joining us on the Innovation World Young Collaborators podcast. You can hear more podcasts by searching for Innovation World on your favorite podcast channel or by visiting innovationworld.org. Bye.
Bye, thank you.